Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy, never ceasing, calls for songs of loudest praise. Teach me ever to adore thee. May I still thy goodness prove, while the hope of endless glory fills my heart with joy and love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, he to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness, like a fetter, bind me closer still to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above, seal it for thy courts above.
Charity really is. Some of us may wonder why the subject of giving deserves a place in the pulpit at all. Shouldn't we talk about faith, grace, and salvation only in the pulpit? But the Bible and the Scripture makes it clear that how we give is inseparably connected to how we believe. And when you look at the Gospel from Mark, John, or from Mark to John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are the Gospels. Jesus spoke more about money, possessions, than about almost any other practical subject, not because Jesus needed support in his ministry, but because our use of earthly resources reveals the true condition of the heart. And when we look at the gospel, how it was advanced in the early days, in the New Testament, the gospel itself was advanced by sacrifice, because God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Every missionary sent, every Bible printed, every soul reached has always moved forward on the current of willing and consecrated giving. And when we hear the word charity, we refer to some charitable institutions. Even our church is classified under the companies of New Zealand as belong to the charitable institutions. And when we hear the word charity, most people think immediately of money, donations, relief funds, and aids for the needy. That's correct. Charitable giving certainly includes financial generosity. And the Bible also takes us much deeper in the meaning of charity. And the Bible defines charity not first as what we give, but who we are becoming. Now let us take note the words of the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 1-3. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Charity is another word for love. The New Testament or the Apostle Paul used the word charity instead of love because charity is much closer to the Greek word agape. Okay? Biblical charity or agape is not measured by amounts, but by love shaped by Christ. So it is love that charity is love that can be seen in the life of Jesus Christ. It is patient, according to the Apostle Paul. It is patient, kind, humble, truth-loving, and enduring. And this love finds its fullest expression in the life and ministry of Jesus Christ himself. His sacrifice, his self-emptying generosity. God's plan for sustaining his work has never been depended on wealthy patrons or earthly powers. I know when you look at the annual budget of every country in the world, you are talking about trillions of dollars, right? And when you think about using this money for the advancing of the gospel, you might think that the gospel would be spread out throughout the world in a very short time. I think about that the same as well. The United States budget, just talking about trillions of dollars every year. New Zealand government's budget every year, you are talking about billions of dollars, not small amount of dollars. So these are all Christian countries, and they can help extend the work immediately in a short moment of time. However, God's work for sustaining his work on earth never been dependent on wealthy patrons or earthly powers. From the beginning, he has chosen a different economy that is systematic, loving, voluntary generosity. And this is what the Spirit of Prophecy states here with striking clarity. And in some few minutes, I would be dwelling upon the statements, and I would try to explain them. I speak of tithing system, yet how meager it looks to my mind. How small the estimate, how vain the endeavor to measure with mathematical rules, time, money, and love against a love that sacrifice that is measureless and incomputable. Tithes for Christ, or meager pittance, shameful recompense for that which costs so much. From the cross of Calvary, Christ calls for unconditional surrender. He promised the young ruler that if he sold all that he had and gave it to the poor and lifted his cross and followed him, he should have treasure in heaven. That's what Jesus said to the young ruler. All we have should be consecrated to God. The majesty of heaven came to the world to die, a sacrifice for the sins of men. But how cold and selfish is the human heart that can turn away from such incomparable love and set itself upon the vain things of the world. Now, the passage that we just read from Volume 4, 119, is not a condemnation of tithing, nor it is saying that tithes are unnecessary. Rather, it is a heart-searching appeal that lifts our eyes from mere calculation to Calvary. Now let me discuss this for a few minutes. There are 8 points that I would like to share from these statements. The first point here is, I speak of tithing system, yet how meager it looks to my mind. Now the spirit of prophecy is struck by how small it appears when compared to what Christ has done for us. Okay? All the contributions and donations we might give to the cause of God is just small when it appears compared to what Christ has really done for us. So we should not dare to compare that to what Jesus had done on the cross. Tithes and offerings, they are ordained by God, we know that. They are necessary for the work of gospel. And also, it is a duty of stewardship. However, in the light of the cross, even faithful tithing seems so small. Not because God demands more, but because Christ gave everything for you and me. And this is what 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9, telling us, you know that the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that yet through his poverty might be rich. So this is what Jesus did for us on the cross, that through his poverty we might become rich spiritually, and finally, when we all are saved eternally, we will be the richest man on earth. Why? As compared to the wealth of the world these days. And you know what I'm talking about. John chapter 14, Christ was talking about that he was preparing a place for us in heaven, a place for us in his Father's house, and mansions. And then also in Revelation chapter 20, talking about the New Jerusalem, where the components are made of pure gold and precious stones. The second point is that how small they estimate. And the spirit of prophecy addressed a dangerous mindset, reducing devotion to God into percentages, formulas, and minimum requirements. Well, of course, the spirit of prophecy does not reject order or system, but warning us against a cold, calculating spirit doing just the bare minimum and measuring duty without love. And we cannot place Christ's sacrifice into a spreadsheet because love cannot be reduced to arithmetic or mathematics. How vain to endeavor to measure with mathematical rules time, money, and love against a love and sacrifice that is measureless and incomputable. Christ's sacrifice has no equivalent. It has no upper limit. It has no comparison. And what else? There's no amount of time, there's no amount of money or service or suffering can ever pay back Calvary. And this reflects what the Apostle Paul says, that the love of Christ passeth understanding. So only when we have the possession of that love, we can understand the enormity of Christ's sacrifice for us. The fourth point, tithes for Christ, or meager pittance, shameful recompense for that which costs so much. And this is a very strong language, but it is not meant to shame obedience. It is meant to awaken love in our hearts. The spirit of prophecy is saying, if we think tithing is a sacrifice, we have misunderstood Calvary. If returning tithes and offerings feels costly, we have lost sight of the cross. That comes to the question, do we really make sacrifice? Is our coming here to the church every Sabbath a sacrifice? I remember, brethren, I visited churches. We have churches in the Philippines that were located in the mountain. I once visited them. I often, for 5 years in working, I visited those churches. Sometimes it rains. There's no good road. So I have to take out my shoes and walk barefoot going to the church. And I thought I was doing a sacrifice for that until I came to the church and met the two sisters. They just came from their house. In their head, they were carrying these heavy things in their head, plus their bags for the Bibles and the books. And they were walking under the heat of the day for an hour just going to the church. And I met them before the Sabbath school started. And they were full of sweats, and their dress are wet with their sweats. And I changed my mind about my feeling that I made a sacrifice going to the church. And I look at them, these people really sacrifice every Sabbath doing this. That was the first time I saw them. And I always saw them because they are doing that every Saturday to go to the church. Yeah, they don't have cars like us here. So I changed my idea of what sacrifice is really. The tithes and offerings, they are not payment, but they are acknowledgement. According to the Bible, all things come of thee, and of thine own we have given thee. So what we give is just a return of what God claims as His. These are not ours. We just return to the Lord what belongs to Him. So it's not giving. It's not actually giving. So we don't really make any sacrifice at all, because what God was saying that we have to return was His, or is His. So all things come of thee, and of thine own we have given thee. From the cross of Calvary, Christ calls for unconditional surrender. The cross does not ask for partial obedience. The cross does not ask for calculated generosity or selective surrender. It calls for the heart. Romans chapter 12, verse 1, I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a what? A living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Returning tithes and offering is only the starting point, but it is not the finish line. Mentioning the rich young ruler, he promised the young ruler that if he sold all that he had and gave it to the poor and lifted his cross and followed him, he should have treasure in heaven. So, by especially mentioning this in this passage of the Spirit of Prophecy, the Spirit of Prophecy highlights a crucial truth. And what is that truth? The issue was not actually money. It was attachment. Jesus did not give everyone the same test. He was just testing the rich young ruler. So Jesus did not give the same test to everyone, but he always exposes the rival of the heart. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And all we have should be consecrated to God, the 7th point. But this does not mean we have to give everything literally. It means nothing is held back from God's authority. Everything is placed under His lordship, and positions becomes just the tools, not idols. Everything that we have should become the tools, not our idols. We become stewards, but not owners. And the majesty of heaven came to the world to die, a sacrifice for the sins of men. And how cold and selfish is the human heart that can turn away from such incomparable love and set itself upon the vain things of this world. This is a tragic contrast. And this is the sorrow of heaven. The infinite love offer finite hearts distracted by vain things. So God is not condemning wealth because He gave us such talents and positions. He is condemning indifference. So when we compare our giving to Christ's sacrifice, even our best offering seems small. The cross calls us beyond percentages to love, beyond calculation to consecration, and beyond duty to devotion. So God is not asking for what we don't have, of course. Social justice. God will not ask what we don't have. He is asking for what we hold onto. So when Christ has the heart, the hands will always follow. At the cross, heaven gave everything. When God gave His Son, He gave all heaven. And every call to generosity calls from that sacrifice. Now I'll give you some examples in the Bible. The first one here that I'm going to narrate was the wise man. The wise men from the east. How many of them? Oh, of course, I expected that answer, but the Bible does not give how many of them. Probably your answer was based on the 3 types of gifts. Right? I could not blame you. So the first recorded gifts given to Jesus were not demanded, taxed, or solicited. No one told them, you have to give this to Jesus. Nobody. They were unsolicited gifts. They were voluntary offerings for worship. And here it is, Matthew chapter 2, verse 11. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These are representations of the wealth of the East. Yeah, because the eastern part of the world has rich of gold, frankincense, and myrrh at the time. So the Magi had been among the first to welcome the Redeemer. Their gift was the first that was laid at his feet. And through that gift, what privilege of ministry was theirs. The offering from the heart that loves, God delights to honor, giving it highest efficiency in service for him. So if we have given our hearts to Jesus, we shall also bring our gifts to him. Our gold and silver, our most precious earthly possessions, our highest mental and spiritual endowments will be freely devoted to him who loves us and gave himself for us. Beautiful. So those gifts were not just symbolic, although they have symbols, when it comes to what pertains to Christ. Like, for example, the gold, okay? The myrrh, the frankincense. These are symbols of the works of Christ. But for Christ and for Joseph and Mary and Christ, the child Jesus Christ, that was not just a symbol. It was also practical, because God used them to provide for Joseph, Mary, and Jesus during their stay in Egypt. Remember, they were persecuted. Herod wants to kill all the babies in Bethlehem. And Mary and Joseph were poor. But the gifts of these wise men was a treasure and useful during their flight and stayed in Egypt. Even, God and heaven still works that way. God often funds his work through hearts that love him enough to give freely. And I have experienced that, brethren. Well, during our stay in South America for 8 years, we build a church and we have scarcity of resources and money. But God gave and touches hearts of our friends. They were not members of our church, but we were just surprised that one day they turned to our door and said, "We have money for you to finish here for your church." That's just amazing, And there are so many situations, and I believe that was a miracle for me, brothers and sisters. Similar to what Jesus said to Peter, go to the sea, and then you'll find a fish, open his mouth, and there's the gold coin. Right? It could happen to you, brethren. Just trust the Lord. God will make everything beautiful in his time. Okay? So, and another case study we have in the Bible, the widow's 2 mites, measuring value heaven's way. So, if the wise man represents wealth laid willingly at the feet of Jesus, the widow's 2 mite represents faith giving everything. Jesus watched, the story goes like this, that Jesus was in the temple. He was watching as wealthy men give large sums of money to the chest. Then Jesus saw a poor widow places 2 mites, almost nothing, into the treasury. And Jesus said, "Of a truth I say unto you, that this poor widow had cast in more than they all. For all these have their abundance cast in unto the offerings of God. But she of her penury had cast in all the living that she had. That was amazing. She did not withhold anything. I remember going back to the story of the widow of Sarepta in the days of Elijah. When Elijah came to her, she was gathering sticks, and Elijah asked her to prepare cakes for him. And the widow said, "No, sir, I am gathering sticks. I am because I'm going to prepare food for me and my son, and we will eat and die." That is the first time I heard somebody was telling that I am going to eat and die. Supposed to be we are eating to live. But that situation is really dire. 3.5 years of famine, without crops, scarcity of water. I could not blame her. But Elijah assures her, "Prepare for me first food, and then after that, prepare for yourself," because a miracle had happened. Okay? So the same with this poor widow. And the spirit of prophecy tells us that the poor widow's example of self-sacrifice had acted and reacted upon thousands of hearts in every land and every age. In other words, those who read the story has been touched. It has brought to the treasury of God gifts from the high and the low, the rich and the poor. It has helped to sustain missions, to establish hospitals, to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick, and preach the gospel to the poor. Multitudes had been blessed through her unselfish deed, and the outworking of all these lines of influence, she, in the day of God, will be permitted to see. How amazing the two mites had sustained all these works and expenses. Not literally, but because people were inspired to what? To support the missions. But one day, the statement, the last statement here is an assurance that that poor woman will surely be saved at last in heaven. And she will be permitted to see the influence of that two mites. Heaven measures gifts not by amount, but by sacrifice, motive, and love. I heard one preacher ask the question, if the rich would give, for example, $10,000 as tithe, and the poor would only give $10 as tithe, who give more and who give less? What do you think? Who give more and who give less? Actually, nobody give less and nobody give more, because those are just 10%, right? But of course, I can understand what you're thinking about. 10,000 is bigger than $10, right? But that is a human calculation. But social justice, in the sight of God, they are all the same. Okay. But of course, we appreciate those offerings and tithes. And I mentioned here several Sabbaths ago that a brother who passed away, he was from New Zealand, migrated to Australia. And before he passed away, all the amounts of his estate he gave to the church. That was a huge amount. Okay. And there are so many brethren in our experience here in Australia and New Zealand who contributed to the cause of God. Now, Mary's alabaster box, another case study, love that looks like waste. There are few stories in the Bible that trouble human logic more than Mary breaking the alabaster box. The disciples, especially Judas, call it what a waste. But Jesus called it beautiful. And this is what explains in the spirit of prophecy. I will not read the whole sentence here. I just cut some of them. There are gifts that we rightly proportion to the character and necessities of the ones upon whom we bestow them. That ointment was a symbol of the overflowing heart of the giver, referring to Mary Magdalene, and is an illustration of the methods of God in the plan of salvation. For nature and grace related to each other manifest the ennobling fullness of the source from which they flow. So love that has been touched by heaven will always seem exercised to a calculating mind. Judas could count the value. What a waste of this amount. It should be given to the poor. Mary counted only Christ's worth. And Jesus declared that wherever the gospel is preached, her story, the story of Magdalene, Mary Magdalene, that breaking of alabaster box would always be repeated and being told. So generosity done in love never disappears. It multiplies through times. And another, this is not from the Bible, and this is not either in our church history. This is from the story of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. There was a church that was built because they call it the Dime Tabernacle. The members of the church at the time, when it was built, was 15,000, probably all over the world. It is called as the Dime Tabernacle because it was not built by millionaires. It was built by ordinary believers giving small, faithful amounts. 10 cents a month. That was the minimum contribution, just 10 cents a month. Thousands of hearts and one purpose, just to build a church. And this is the Dime Tabernacle. And this is not just a small church building. It can house almost 4,000 people. Okay? So, yeah, it was burned down probably in 1921. But it stayed for many years. So for one purpose, the churches, the members contributed a minimum of 1 dime, 10 cents a month. And look, brethren, they were able to build that. And that follows our procedure in the Sabbath school lessons. For example, we are asking for the first Sabbath offerings. That is a monthly project, because we believe in the system that God instituted from the beginning of our history of our church. And Ellen White expressed this in these passages. Our work was not sustained by large gifts or legacies, for we have few wealthy men among us. What is the secret of our prosperity? We have moved under the orders of the captain of our salvation. God has blessed our united efforts. The truth has spread and flourished. Institutions have multiplied. The mustard seed has grown to a great tree. The system of organization has proved a grand success. Systematic benevolence was entered into according to the Bible plan. Okay? So there were systematic benevolence has been in the Bible. This principle has been also in the Bible. Not only in the church practiced, but also, do you know who practiced this systematic benevolence? and that saves the people of the world for 7 years of famine? Joseph. He told Pharaoh, you have to separate 1/5 of all the harvest and store them in a place for the 7 years of famine. That is systematic benevolence. The principle there. So the mustard seed grew into a tree not because of wealth, but because of unity, sacrifice, and faith. But somehow, human eyes is having a distorted spiritual eyesight. What we are always focusing with our naked eye is the things that can be seen. While we look not at the things which are seen, the things which are seen are just what? Temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Materialism distorts the visions. And I like this author. She was blind from birth, Helen Keller. The most pathetic person is the one who has sight but no vision, or the vision was distorted. I was shown that all who profess the present truth would be tested and tried. Their love for Jesus' coming will be proved and manifested to others whether it is genuine. So we all profess to be waiting for the coming of Jesus, but your faith and my faith will be tested whether it is genuine or not. And all I saw would not stand the test. Some love this world so much that it swallows up their love for the truth. As their treasures here increase, their interest in the heavenly treasure decreases. That is an example of a distorted vision. The more they possess of this world, the more closely they hug it to them, as if fearful their coveted treasure would be taken from them. The more they possess, the less do they have to bestow upon others, for the more they have, the poorer they feel. Oh, the deceitfulness of riches, they will not see and feel the wants of the cause of God. So, wealth and materialism can also distort our visions. It can deceive us as well. So when possessions grow, generosity often shrinks, unless the heart is daily surrendered to Christ. There's a warning for us as well. Have you heard about prosperity preachers or prosperity gospel? Yeah, they are there. But this is a counterfeit generosity that is being taught today. The idea that giving guarantees wealth. And sometimes they misunderstood the passage in the Bible and for them it says that gain is godliness. In other words, the more you possess money, the more you have material blessings, they consider that as godliness. If you are poor, well, you are sorry about that. But that's the idea of prosperity gospel. This theology, for example, shifts the motive. In other words, you have to give in order to get. You have to serve in order to gain. You have to obey in order to profit. That's prosperity gospel. But we don't do that here. That is not what the teachings of the Bible and spirit of prophecy. The Bible teaches something far better. Jesus was the most faithful son who ever lived, and he had no place to lay his head. True giving is not a transaction, but it is a relationship. And true prosperity is focusing on spiritual riches, not just the material. Those churches, according to the Spirit prophecy, those churches who are the most systematic and liberal in sustaining the cause of God are the most prosperous spiritually. True liberality in the follower of Christ identifies his interests with that of his master. In God's dealing with the Jews and his people to the end of time, he requires systematic benevolence proportionate to their income. And the plan of salvation was laid by the infinite sacrifice of the Son of God. The light of the gospel shining from the cross of Christ rebukes selfishness and encourages liberality and benevolence. It is not to be a lamented fact that there are increasing calls to give. You will find that, brother, in our church, there are so many people who are asking for help, even from individuals. They were not asking directly to the church, but they were asking from the ministers, from the pastors. So many of them. And it is not new. You will help one, another will come. And we should not be wary of well-doing, as long as God will bless our hands with something to give. Now, spiritual prosperity is not measured in bank accounts, but in soul rich, in prayers answered, love expanded, and faith strengthened. These are true spiritual riches. We would be happy even though we spend much just to reach out one soul. We are happy for that because we know the value of one soul in the sight of God. And even if there is only one soul that sinned, Christ would still have come and died for that one soul. That's the value of a soul. Cornelius' alms rose before God as a memorial. Giving stands beside prayer in heaven's record. So we have in the Bible different people, members of the church, not members of the church. When they are touched by the love of Christ, they responded to giving and consecrating all that they have. So when time meets eternity, when Kairos meets God's time, time is slipping into eternity, and Ellen White closes with an appeal that reaches every heart. Time is rapidly passing into eternity. Let us not keep back from God that which is His own. Let us not refuse Him that which, though it cannot be given with merit, cannot be denied without ruin. He asked for a whole heart. What shall we do with our heart? If God will ask your heart, give it to Him. It is His, both by creation and by redemption. He asked for your intellect, give it to Him. It is His. He asked for your money, give it to Him. It is His. So, charitable giving is not about loss. It is about alignment. Aligning our hearts with God's heart, aligning our treasures with eternity. Jesus gave all and invites us to respond. Not with reluctance, not fearful, but joyful, for God loves a cheerful giver. So because where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. So we have to remember that, brethren, if our hearts is on the eternal treasure, we have to make sure that our heart will also be with the eternal treasure that God is preparing for us. And brothers and sisters, we have nothing to lose. When Noah received the message of judgment, when he heard that God would destroy the world and only gave human beings 120 years, he used all his possessions to build the ark. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus were the wealthiest men in Judea, and they could sustain the whole Jewish economy with their own wealth alone. But they used that for the early church. They used their wealth to sustain the early church. And they were not sorry. When Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70 AD, nothing has to be sorry. Why? Because everything was done according to God's plan in sustaining the work of the early church. So for us, brothers and sisters, we have to pray that the Lord will help us to use our ways and means to sustain His work and to support His cause in every part of the field around the world. And mind you, brothers and sisters, let us consider this matter, and may the Lord bless us. Amen.